Hi, today we're going to look at the Cambridge Pseudocode Guide for Teachers. Now, if you're not with Cambridge, don't run away. And if you're not a teacher, don't run away. It's a very useful guide. It's just a little booklet, essentially, 16 pages. And it gives you all the rules for pseudocode. I find it's very helpful. And even though it says it's for teachers, it's actually also for students because it's got all the rules for pseudocode very neatly laid out. And I find this helps a lot because at school, you learn a programming language and you know all the rules and you know how it works. So people find it much easier to write code than to write pseudocode. But if you've got rules to write pseudocode with, then you will find it easier. So stick with me. And remember that this is an excellent resource for South Africa's IT course too, even though it says it's for the Cambridge IGCSE Computer Science course. If you look, this is the front page, and we are now going to switch to the actual pseudocode guide. This is what it looks like. And I will show you on the description under the video. I will let you know where you can go and download this. It's a PDF. So let's go and look at the table of contents. You can see the chapter 1 is just a little bit of blah, blah, blah about different little items. Not very important, but chapter 2 talks about variables, constants, and data types. Chapter 3 is arrays, 4 different operations. Chapter 5 is selection, and chapter 6 is iteration. So not very long, but very, very helpful. I'm going to run down to chapter 2. If you want to go and read up chapter 1, you can see what that's about. But here's where it talks about the different variables. Now, usually in pseudocode, you do not need to declare variables. But if you did want to declare them, there are usually no marks for doing this in an exam, but just so that you know, there are different types of variables. The integer, which is a whole number, real, a number capable of containing a fraction, a char, which is just a single character, a string, which is a sequence of 0 or more characters, and a Boolean, which can be true or false. And remember that identifiers are just the names that you give your variables or your constants, procedures, and functions. But you should know the rules of how you call your variables by now. An assignment, the assignment operator is the arrow. All it means is, if you look at this line, it means store the value into the identifier. So usually it would be a variable, and instead of saying variable equals 3 or whatever your value is, you would put an arrow there, which is the assignment variable. It means assign the value to the identifier. Here's an example. So counter gets the value 0, where counter is the name of a variable. Or counter gets the value of counter plus 1. It's just when you are incrementing a counter. And so on. Right, let's go and look at how you declare arrays. So they've got a very long description here, but you don't have to do all of that. Basically, when you're declaring an array, the important thing is the name of the array, the size of the array, always in square brackets, remember that, and what type of values is your array going to store. So you can say declare and then put the name of the array, like student names, colon, then array, square brackets, 1 to 30 of string. But if you didn't put the of there and the array there and the declare there, you would still get your marks. If you just said student names and even left the colon out, student names, square brackets, 1 colon 30, close square brackets, string, you would get your marks. But if you want to learn this long way of writing it, that's also great. Then when you use arrays, if you want to store a value, say into element 1 of student names, you say student name square brackets 1. Then you've got the assignment, so gets the value Ali. Or noughts and crosses square brackets 2 gets the value X. That just means store X in the second element or the second box of the noughts and crosses array. And I will let you go and look at the rest of that on your own. Let's go on to input and output, two very important things, very easy things to do if you get a pseudocode question. Always do the input and the output. Usually that's quite clear what you need to do. So input, you just say input, and then whatever variable you need to input, you put its name there, and output, and whatever value or variable you want to output, you put its name there. Then there's the arithmetic operations. You can do plus, minus, times, which is a star, and divide, which is a slash. You can also use mod, which is to find a remainder of a division, or div, which is integer division. Or if you want to describe it in your pseudocode, it's also fine. Then there are the logic operators, the and the or, and the not. And these are always done on Boolean variables, and it's usually used in an if, or maybe in a while, or a repeat until, which we'll cover just now. So those are called the logic operators. Selection is for if statements and switch cases, but we'll first look at the if. So please note that over here in the if statement, you can see that all the keywords are in capitals. So that is important. And also note that we say if, and then we put our condition, whatever we're testing, if x equals y. The then is indented. That means that it's not in line with the if. It's a little bit two spaces in. And then whatever statement you want to do as a result of the then of the if condition being true is indented a little further. You do not have to lay out your if exactly like this. I've sometimes even seen the solutions in the Cambridge exams all on one line. If x equals y, then x equals 10, all on one line. And so you can do that, but this is a very neat way of doing it. If you use your indentation. If you've got an else, you put it straight under the then. So you see your indentation here, the else comes straight under the then. The end if at the end comes straight under the if. The end if comes straight under the if. Okay, so it looks neat and tidy. So you can also have an if statement inside an if. So let's have a look at this one. So here you see this if, which goes all the way to that end if, is inside the bigger if, which is outside there. They haven't indented that properly. But there's your if. Oh, actually, they probably forgot one end if, or I don't know. Anyway, it looks a little bit untidy there. So, yeah, ifs and end ifs, very important to indent. However you choose to structure them, do remember the indentation. A switch case, now if you're doing Java, you will have a switch case. If you're doing Python, you won't know anything about a switch case. A switch case is basically when you've got lots of ifs under each other. Instead of going if then and if then, you could rather use a switch case, which is when you test one variable for different values. So you go case of whatever your variable is, the identifier, you put it in there. Then value 1 colon and the statement, value 2 colon and the statement. And then you get to end case. If you want a default, so if the identifier or the variable is not equal to any of the values, it comes down to the otherwise, and you do that statement that it goes like that. You put your otherwise right at the end, and also note the indentation here. So here's a nice example. You input move, case of move. The move is your variable. If move is equal to W, position gets position minus 10. If it's equal to S, position gets position plus 10. If it's A, position gets position minus 1, D, position gets position plus 1, and the otherwise is there in case move is not W or S or A or D. And then you just go beep because your user didn't enter the right value. And then the end case. Let's go on to iteration. Iteration just means that you're repeating something over and over again. So we've got for loops. We've got for identifier gets value 1 to value 2, and then the statements in there, and a next at the end. I've also seen people say end for at the end. The important thing is that you have an identifier that is often called the loop variable. You can just call it loop or counter. And it could start at, usually often starts at 1, and say you want to repeat the loop 10 times, you would go 1 to 10. And then you have all your statements you want to repeat. Note the indentation again. Just going to draw it in there for you. So there's your indentation. Nice and neat. So it's very clear what belongs inside the for loop, and then the next right at the end. And if you want to step in twos instead of ones, you can say step 2. If you want to count in 2s or 3s or whatever it is. And here's an example of a for loop inside a for loop. You can see there's your for loop inside this bigger for loop. That is called a nested loop, which is you probably might come across sometimes. The other two kinds of loops are the repeat until, repeat and then your statements, and then until and the condition. A repeat until loop always gets repeated at least once because we only test the condition at the end of the loop. As an example, repeat, output, please enter the password, input password, until password equals secret. So as long as the person doesn't input the correct password, this loop is going to continue repeating again and again. And then a while loop. This loop, the condition is tested at the beginning of the loop. So it may not repeat at all. So we go while, condition, and then do. There's the keyword do, all in capitals. The keywords, and then your statement, indented again, and end while. And that's basically it. So you can see it's not that many commands to remember. Let's go back to my presentation here. So here's a little summary. We've looked at assignment, which is when you use that arrow. We've looked at how to declare arrays. Array name, colon, square brackets, 1 to 30, close square brackets, string. We've looked at input and output, arithmetic operators, plus, minus, times, and divide. The logic operators and, or, and not. We've looked at if statements, case statements, for loops, repeat until, and while. So I will put a description under the video for where you can download this guide, and I hope this has helped you, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.